a lot to the user roles, and they can be very confusing. I get that. And this is probably one area that Deb and I get lots of phone calls on or emails is about the user roles. So I'm going to try my best to explain. Please, please don't hesitate to ask questions. So if I'm not making sense, just let me know, and I'll do my best to try to make it make sense when I see a bunch of people joining right now. So, okay, so we're going to get started, and let's go to my first slide here. So doesn't matter what portal you're on, there's usually a resource tab somewhere, whether it's a job portal, volunteer, or the professional development. And on each of those portals under that resource tab, there is a document that talks about the roles, user roles, and it explains them, and it looks like this when you open it. But you'll find this document on your user role tab. So if you forget, you can always open it and kind of look at it to help maybe clarify. But like I said, Deb and I, we don't mind answering questions either. That document covers all of our portals. So if you have employee records, we call that Portal 0. It's going to explain the roles for Portal 0, as well as the online application, which is Portal 1, a professional development portal, and their volunteer portal. And some of the roles are the same throughout the portals. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go through. So, okay, so let's get going. So whenever anybody has an account, it doesn't matter what portal they belong to, there's two roles everybody has to have. They have to be a registered user, and they have to be a subscriber. So if you ever go and look at someone's roles and they're not there, that's a big red flag. Their account's probably not going to work right. They're going to get weird. They're not going to be able to log in, or they're going to get funny errors. Sorry, not arrows, sorry. So those two roles, everybody has to have them. Doesn't matter what else. Those two roles are really, really important just so their account works. They're usually automatically assigned when you create an account, and you shouldn't have to worry about it. But every once in a while, when we kind of add people in the background, they don't get added in things. If they're not there, it might be goofy. Okay. I think you guys all understand that those are the two roles that everybody has. If not, interrupt me and I can explain. Okay. Then we move on to the guest role. This one is probably the most confusing for people to get. There's two roles in the system. We have guest and we have applicant if you're a PD person or a jobs person or a volunteer portal. And if you're a PD, it's a PD user. But guest is the first role they get when they create their account. It's an automatic role. And what it means is they've created an account, but they haven't given you enough information so that we know what kind of applicant or what kind of volunteer or what type of PD user they are. So it typically means they didn't complete their profile. So they haven't gone into, like, if in jobs and in volunteer, they got to select either the type of applicant they want to be, like I'm going to be a certificated applicant or I'm going to be a classroom volunteer. And then they go through the disclosure and all that, and they create they finish that. But until they do that, when they just have that guest role, it's a signal to us that they're not complete. We really don't know where to put them yet. Usually, people with the role of guest, you can't find them in the search screen. So if you're an applicant search or volunteer search, they're not going to show up because we don't have enough information on them necessarily to show up. A good example of that would be an applicant that hasn't selected what interest type they are. So when you go to applicant search, it searches and puts people by their interest type. So if they don't have an interest type because they haven't completed their profile, you're not going to find them in applicant search. And it's the same with volunteer search. So does that make sense what a guest is? It's somebody who doesn't have a completed profile. It's automatic role. I'm going to mute a few people because I hear click. Okay. You don't want to just take it away either. You want them to complete that profile, and then the system will take it away once they're done, and it gives them the next role that we're going to talk about. It's either the applicant role or the PD user. So applicant is a role we use in volunteer and jobs. PD user is what we use in the PD portal. And that tells us they've completed their profile. They've got a good account. We know who they are. We know where they belong. You can't have guest and an applicant. If you have both, you're going to get an error when that person logs into their account. It's one or the other. And typically, we let the system do the swapping of the roles for you, so you don't ever have to worry about that. So they go in, they complete their profile, they press that last button, and magically on the jobs portal, they get an email saying, hey, you completed your profile. It gives them their checklist, and it switches the two roles. Once they have that applicant role or that PD user role, then they're searchable. You can go into applicant search or volunteer search, and you'll be able to find that particular person. When that role is also added, these people get added to very specific tables. If it's a jobs or a PD person, they're put in the personnel table. So a guest typically isn't living in the personnel table. So that's another reason we know they're not complete, because we couldn't find them in that table. And volunteers, once they finish their profile, they're added to the volunteer table. And those are really the tables that we use in the search features. Does that make sense, the difference between guest and applicant? I hope it does. If it doesn't, I can kind of try to explain a little more. But the big thing I want you to take from this is that it's one or the other. They're either a guest or they're an applicant. They're not both. And they have to be one or the other. Okay. And I see Deb joined us. Hi, Deb. I don't know if you're connected to the sound, but welcome.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was a few minutes late.
Perfect. So, Deb, if I'm missing something important, please feel free to add to our little spiel here. Okay, so let's move on. So guest, applicant. Another role that you see is employee. And basically, that role is used to mark your employees, so you have a way of identifying who your employees are and who isn't an employee. It's not typically an automatic role. You have to assign it, unless in the jobs portal, when you complete the job recommendation, you have the option to have it be an automatic add to a person's account. This role is really important because districts have the ability to control what employees see and do not see and what employees have to do or not have to do. A good example would be in the job system. Some districts make it so employees don't have to complete a disclosure. So that role is important. Or you could make it so employees can't update stuff. Like maybe you don't want the employees to go in and change their address or phone number. There's defaults that are tied to that employee role. So that's where it's important. In the professional development system, the employee role is really nice because then you can pull up those particular people in the employee information tab and maybe update their exchange ID or update their position so you wouldn't actually have to shadow those people, or update their email address without having to shadow them because they're an employee and they show up in that tab. The other way that role is important is it's a way for the system to mark people on reports. So when we pull reports in the job system, often at times the employees have a little asterisk, that little asterisk sign, so you know right away of this list of people, all these with the asterisk have that employee role. So questions about the employee role? It's pretty straightforward, I think. Okay, let's go on to the next role. System manager. This is an important role. This role basically gives whoever has this role access to this system manager menu within the system, so the one that's always off to the right. It's typically limited to HR or professional development staff, or, you don't want to give it to everybody. By giving someone this role, it gives them the ability to shadow other people's accounts, and it gives them the ability to help people with their accounts. Because if you have the system manager role, you're going to have the ability to get into the user accounts portion of the portal and, fix things, add people to portals, add roles. Also, the system manager has access to the database and any of the lookup tables. So that's what that role stands for. If you want someone to have access to that system manager tab menu on the, on the right in your portal, that's what that role's for. And that people often forget that it's tied to the shadowing of accounts. So if they don't, you have to have that role to be able to shadow people. It's kind of like a site administrator in a way is what a system manager is. It's someone who kind of is typically kind of overtaking the site, separate from the functions of the site, if that makes sense, I hope. Okay. Questions about system manager? Anything important I'm missing, Deb, when it comes to system manager?
Not that I can think of, but that's also where the system utilities lay.
Yes.
So
yes.
Might want to just speak briefly to that, where the email log.
Yes, and we're going to go over that one later in the presentation, kind of what happens under that part of the world. Okay. Some other, and then the HR administrator role can be found in the jobs portal and the volunteer portal, and that's kind of the master role. Anybody who has the HR administrator role sees everything under the management tab. So whether it be the volunteer portal or the management, the jobs portal, that whole tab, job requests, applicant search, reports, anything on that tab, they have access to. They also can see any of the confidential information. If someone has the HR administrator role, they don't need any of the lesser JAS roles except for router, if they're a router. And we're going to talk about those lesser roles in a minute. But I often, when I help people and they're having problems, I will see someone has the HR administrator role, and they might have screener, they might have interviewer, and all those other roles. And those lesser roles can actually mess up this higher role and make it so they can't see anything. So it's kind of, you either have this role or you have some of the other roles we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And then if you are part of a co-op, we have this other role called HR district admin. And so rather than giving our co-op users this HR administrator, we give them the district administrator. So they're tied to seeing just their district information, not the whole portal. And so we work with our co-ops since that role isn't used except for by them, and we help them with that one. So I won't spend a ton of time on that. But I just want to make sure everybody understands that HR administrator role is a master role. You get that one, and then you don't need the other roles below it. So let's kind of move on to those next roles. Supervisor. So if you have the HR admin role, you technically get all the supervisor roles without having to click them. And so what the supervisor roles, they correspond to the interest types in your system. And I get a lot of people saying, well, why can't we just call them, why can't supervisor 1 be certificated or whatever? Well, we let each site set up their interest types the way they want, and they wouldn't always correspond. So that's why it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But if your first interest type is certificated, then supervisor 1 would be people who have access to the certificated applicants. And if you're, does that make sense? And so if you're the next interest type listed when you're looking like an applicant search, they go across the screen is maybe certificated specialist, they would be supervisor 2. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So those roles will give people access. If anybody has a supervisor role, they're going to see applicant search and applicant reports under the management menu, and they're going to only see the corresponding interest type when they're on that tab. So if they only have supervisor 1 and that's classroom teacher, when they go to applicant search, they're only going to see the radio button for teachers. They're not going to see coaches or classified or anything like that. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing to remember when you're dealing with the supervisor roles, that they're limited to the assigned location of the user. So an example, I've got Joe Smith, and he works at the high school, and he has supervisor 1. He's only going to see certificated applicants that apply for jobs that are assigned to the high school. We do give you the ability to give people up to 3 locations. So technically, if he was at the high school and the middle school, he could see both of those middle school and high school jobs. And I know that's kind of hard for people to grasp, that we're limiting them by type and also by location. But, you know, I like to think when it comes to hiring and dealing with all the confidential data with jobs and stuff, we want to protect those hiring managers, and we don't want them to have access to everything because they can get themselves into trouble. So that's why we have to limit things, and that's why we have roles to kind of limit access. You know, in HR, you're professionals, you kind of know the ins and outs a little better than maybe a building principal. That's why you see everything. But, you know, we want to limit liability is really what it comes down to. So supervisor roles, I'm just going to repeat that I said it before, but when they have any supervisor role, it gives them access to the search and the reports tab under that management menu. Okay.
Bree, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Chris.
Yeah.
So on, for example, I have one special services director that likes to see certificated and classified applicants across many schools.
Yeah.
And so what I've been able to do is give him the primary location, which is special services, but most of the jobs are posted by the school that they're, where the position's at. And so I've kind of had problems trying to figure out how to let him, you know, except to go in and change, you know, alternate location 2 to something else temporarily. Would you suggest that'd be the best way to do it?
I actually have a role that's perfect that you'll want to add, and we're going to get to that one. It might be the next role we're going to talk about. Can't remember.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So when we get to it, I will make sure, I'm going to say, Chris, this is the role you need to give your special service person, okay?
Okay,
thank
you.
Next or not, I can't remember, but that's a great question, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So supervisors, do we get that they're tied to the interest type? Okay. And, okay, it's the next slide after this, Chris, so I promise I'll talk about it when we get to it. There's a bunch of other roles when, specifically with the job system, we've got job request, job recommendation, job interview, screener. By giving someone those roles, it basically just opens so that menu item shows up. So if I give someone job request, they're going to see the job request menu under the job request tab under the management menu. And they also will need one of those supervisor roles, because you could just give them job requests. If you don't give them any supervisory roles, they're going to see the tab, but they're not going to have a radio button to search for people. So they work in conjunction with one another. So if I want someone to be able to submit a job request for teachers, we'd give them the job request role so they see that tab, and then we'd give them the supervisor that corresponds with whatever interest type your teachers are set to be. Same thing with recommendation, interview, or screener. By giving them the roles, it just opens up the tab so they can see those tabs underneath that menu, that management menu. This is also limited by location that they're assigned to. So if I have job request teachers and I work at the high school, I'm only going to see the high school jobs, okay, for teachers. Let's go on to the next slide. We have a special role called program manager. And Chris, this role is meant for those people like your special service director. They might be assigned, you know, to your administration building, but they're overseeing hiring for every building within the district. So that program manager kind of overrides the location and lets them see all locations. We don't like to give it out to a lot of people, but that role was really meant for people like your special services people, or maybe your food service person who, you know, places people at all their buildings. You know, they're only going to see classified people because food service is typically a classified job type, interest type, but then they can hire for all your buildings in the district. Same with maybe I'm trying to think of other programs, but special services is usually the most common. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, it does. And actually, I see several other applications that we can use that for. And when you mentioned food service, right now we put them under a location called nutrition services just so that supervisor can see that. But then it throws people off because they want to know where the job's located. You know, so we end up having to put that in the comments as to where the job's located. So that might be a way to fix that, although that program manager would be allowed to see all
educators.
Right, all classes. Well, could you limit it to say just just classified?
It would just be classified. So they would see just classified jobs.
Across all schools.
Yes. So
okay.
And that's one reason why we added up to 9 interest types, and we haven't split out some of yours, but for some people, they wanted to, because classified is a pretty broad grouping. When you think about it, that could be bus drivers, paraeducators, secretaries. So we did add some additional interest types. So if you need to break out some of those groups, typically we're finding districts are maybe putting paraeducators as their own interest type because their checklist is so different, with some of the requirements like having an AA or whatever. So
does that cause a problem though because right now when we have people that are applying, they may not necessarily know the difference between certificate and classified, so they check both, and then they'd wonder why they have an incomplete application.
Yes. So the more interest items or interest types you allow can cause more confusion.
Okay.
To put it that way. So it's kind of you got to weigh the good with the bad.
Okay.
So to speak.
Gotcha.
With some districts, we've added interest types, and we've went through their pool and kind of found the people that were under the old one, and we've moved them. Most of them we don't. But you and I could have a conversation about that separately, about what would maybe work best for your district. And, if you and I want to talk about, like, some of these roles and stuff, I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and kind of come up with a plan. Like, we should give this role, this program manager really does apply for this person and they need it. Mm-hmm. Or, like, with food services, maybe we'll keep doing it the way we are. But we could sit down and we could kind of come up.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because we especially have that problem here at the district office where we have several administrators that oversee different areas, and it's just been kind of difficult figuring out how to let them see. I've been basically leaving it wide open because I wasn't sure what else to do. So
exactly. Okay. Yeah, but
Perfect.
We can kind of and I would be more than happy to help you with that. So
okay, awesome.
All
Thanks,
right.
Bree.
You're welcome. So hopefully everybody gets that. Program manager basically overrides all locations. It just says you can see every location of the interest type you're assigned to. So that, you have to have a supervisor role with it, but that's what that program manager does. It overrides the locations. Okay. So it's used in conjunction with the supervisor role, just like all the others. Okay, let's move on to the next role, router. Not everybody uses routers, but if you're a district that does use routing, you probably know this role really well. The router the purpose of this role is to give that ability to review the job requests and job recommendations that they're the assigned router for. So that's all it is. And then our newest role that we added specifically to the job portal is the substitute role. And this is a lot like the employee role. This is a way for you to mark your pool. So if you hire someone as a substitute, they can show up on reports, the little S, so that, if you're looking at who applied for a job, anybody with the substitute would have a little S, and your employees might have the asterisk. So it's just another way for you to know where they fit, and they can be marked on reports and stuff. A lot of people didn't want to mark their substitutes as employee. They wanted a second role, so that's why we added it. And when you're in applicant search, there's the little row, there's a column, and they'll be indicated with an S that they're a substitute, just like the employees have the little person head shows up. So I think these are the main job roles. Now we're going to talk about some of the special pro dev roles, and then we're going to finish up with volunteer roles. So I know some of you are only here for volunteer, pro dev and stuff. So we're kind of doing it all at once, so bear with me. Okay, so next slide. Oh, I guess we're doing volunteer before pro dev. So in volunteer, you guys have a lot of the same roles as the jobs portal because it's basically a pared down version of the jobs portal, but we gave you that volunteer support, and really that role, because we don't want to give you maybe your volunteer coordinators at the building, they don't need access to the confidential data that you're going to find under the search screen, but they need a way to look at who's been approved and not approved. So by giving that volunteer support role, that gives them access to the export info tab under your management menu so they can see your list of who's approved, who's not been approved, and who's pending. And we don't have as much issues with our volunteer portal with roles because there's not as many. So hopefully you guys all understand what that role's for. Okay. Now, PD. There are a lot of PD roles that that you will see on the screen that we're not even going to talk about today because they were developed for one of our out-of-state clients, and most of you that are within the state of Washington anyway would never use them, so I'm not even going to bore you with what they are. We're going to go over the ones that are important to you. A big role is instructor. Basically, when you give someone the role of instructor, they see a few things. They're given access to the course request tab, and they're given access to the instructor menu and all the options that fall under the instructor menu. So like course utilities, they're going to see the invite, or wait, no, they're going to see where their courses are listed. They're going to have access to the reports. Also, when you give someone the instructor role, they're going to see the management menu, but the only thing they're going to see under the management menu is the invite register tool. Okay. We also have the role of facilitator. And a facilitator is the helper to the instructor. So if you give someone the facilitator role, they're going to also see that course request tab, I believe, because they can help put in course requests. And they're going to see that management menu, and under the management menu, they're going to see the flyout menu for facilitator. And basically, a facilitator has the same ability as an instructor, but they're not the instructor. They can go in and they can verify attendance, they can print reports, they can adjust seat counts, and so on. So, you know, instructor and facilitator. Also, when you give someone the role of instructor, they're going to get another tab under their My Records where they put their instructor information, which is basically the VITA and stuff that the state likes them to have on file. Am I missing anything, Deb, when it comes to instructor and facilitator? Important?
No, and just for a clarification is that when you're assigned the instructor role, you only see your courses. They don't see everything else in the course request, just the courses that they create.
And the other thing that happens with the instructor role is when you are creating a course request, your name shows up as an instructor under the drop-down. So especially when you go to tab 7 and you're adding sessions, you know, anybody who's an instructor is going to show up as an additional instructor to assign to the course. And same with course request under the facilitator tab. The way to get your name listed under that tab as a facilitator is you need to have that facilitator role. So those are pretty straightforward. We don't get a lot of questions on those roles, but I figure we should go over them. PD supervisor, however, is when I do get a lot of questions. And when you have that role, it gives you access to the PD supervisor menu. Not a lot of our districts actually use that menu. Typically, these are your building or department administrators, and it gives them the ability to process course approval requests. But like I said, not a lot of our districts actually use that part of the portal. I think there's only a couple. So that's what a PD supervisor. Also, if you have the PD supervisor role, when you're filling out your course request and it's that authorizing administrator tab or call or option, whatever, that's how you get on that drop-down list. So you can select who's authorizing that course to be taught. that's what that PD supervisor role kind of where it belongs and what it stands for. Fiscal manager gives someone access to the fiscal manager menu options under the management tab, and it's only used in districts that do any type of payment processing and stuff, and there's only a couple of you as well. But that's basically who's in charge of the fiscal side of things, and it gives them up so they see that fiscal menu. Otherwise, it's hidden from them. Okay, registrar. This is typically the person in HR that is in charge of uploading credits into your employee system. So if you give someone the registrar role, they will see that registrar menu, which is the posting courses menu and everything, and it gives them access to the export info report so that they can pull, if you're a Skyward Westpac user, you can get your Skyward upload, or if you're a Business Plus user or so on. It also can be a default. There's a default in the lookup tables that you can have your registrar get emails for stuff related to the registrar. But that's usually just that HR person who's working in conjunction with your PD department for getting those credits added for all that fun salary placement stuff. But the PD manager, that's a pretty important role. In my mind, it's very similar to the HR administrator, you know, in the jobs role. That's kind of the person who's overseeing all the PD operations. It gives them access to every menu option under the management tab. It also gives them access to all course data. So like Deb was saying, if you're an instructor, you're only going to see your courses, but a PD manager sees all. They can go in to any instructor's courses and look at participants, or they can modify a course request, or they can do attendance for an instructor. So that PD manager role really is the master role for that particular portal. Am I missing anything, Deb, about PD manager?
Nope.
Okay. Sometimes I bounce around. I'm like a ping pong ball. I don't mean to be, but I am. Okay. And so we also have some roles that are very specific to the employee records management portal. And so I know I've got a few of you guys on here as well. And the big one is there's a role. So if you're using the job system, your employees are automatically getting added to employee records. But sometimes you might have someone that you need to add yourself. And so there's a way to do it. And when you add a new user to the portal, they're going to get this role of new registration. And then you'll be able to go into the search feature. I think I have that slide in here. Oh, we're going to talk about it. I didn't put the slide in. Okay. And search for those people with new registration, so then you can go in and verify their data, you know, add any work experience or education and so on. So it's a way to pull those people that haven't really been verified. And then once you've done that, then you would remove the role so that they wouldn't come up every time you go in and look at them. Okay. But like I said, I won't spend a ton of time on that the ERM roles right now, but I just wanted to point that one out. Okay. So we talked about the roles. Now, how do we go when we need to add roles to someone's account? So we're going to show you there's a couple ways to do that. In order to manage roles, you got to have that system manager role assigned to you, because that gives you the ability to see the system manager tab. And specifically, then you can go to the system utilities tab within that there. And when you're on system utilities, there's 4 options of where you can go. You can go to the assign roles tab. You also have access to see the email log or your district information, or you can go into user accounts. And for our webinar today, we're really just going to talk about the first tab, assigning roles, and the second or the 4th tab, the user accounts, and how do I help people when they need help, you know. And so that's kind of where we're going now with the webinar. So it automatically defaults to open to the assign roles tab. And when you're there, it looks like this. And the first thing, this is where I like to go if I'm going to add the same role to a bunch of people. If I'm just looking at one person's account, I like to go to user accounts to look at the roles and make changes. But if I'm going to go in here and say I want to add the employee role to a bunch of people, I would do it on this screen. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to select the portal that you want to add the role. And you'll notice that this is going to look different for different clients, because if you're only a jobs application, that's going to be your only option. But if you have multiple portals, then you can select between the portal. You're going to tell it which portal, and then from this drop down, you're going to pick the role that you want to add to people. So for on my example, we're going to add the employee role. And what happens is everybody that has the role shows up on the right. So these are all my people in my system that have the role. And then to add people, you're going to start by clicking on the first letter of their last name that you want to add. So on my sample, I picked A, and it tells me all my users under the last name that starts with A. And I would find the person I want to add, and I would actually, with my mouse, click on their name, and it's going to highlight them. And then I press this Add Users Role, and all of a sudden, they'll show up over here on this side. So that's how we mass add, and I could keep going and adding and adding and adding until I get the people I want to have that employee role. But what a lot of people don't realize, this also works in reverse. I can come here to remove roles as well. So I do the same thing. I'm going to pick the portal, I'm going to pick the role, but rather than clicking on the alphabet to find them, I'm going to go over here to where everybody already lives that has the role, and I'm going to scroll through my list till I find the person I want to delete or remove the role from. So if I didn't want Don Driver to have the employee role anymore because he left, you know, he resigned, I could click, highlight his name with my mouse, and press the remove button, and his name will disappear from that list. But I just want to make sure you guys know that it works both for adding and removing.
That's a really cool function because I didn't realize, you know, a lot of times we have people that start out as employees, and then they leave and they come back as a sub, but they're still showing up as an employee. And I always thought I had to just remember who they were and go to them. So now I can actually just pull up this list.
You can come here and just delete, 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 and that role goes away, and they won't be marked in the system anymore.
Is there a way to print, to do like a data dump of that list, or do you have to just scroll through and look at the list?
I can give you a data dump. It's easy for me to do that.
Okay.
I could show you how to do it, but it's probably quicker for me just to send it to you.
Yeah, there's just a lot of cleanup that I think we need to do on our end, because we've had a lot of people leave and stuff like that, and it does throw our hiring managers off when they think that someone's still an employee. So
exactly. Okay. So yes, I can help you with that. That's pretty easy, and I'll get you that list.
Okay, thank you.
And this is also where I would come to add that substitute role. You know, like if you wanted to mark who you know who your subs are, this is a place, you know, a nice way from this drop down you could pick sub, and then you could really quickly go through and find your subs and add them. Just another thought, or remove them if they leave. Okay, so that's assign roles. So now we're going to go and we're going to spend some time under the user account tab and talk about all the different things you can do there. Because I think we forget. We know some of the things we can do under that tab, but there's more than you think. So when you're in user accounts, you know, you can quickly search for a specific user. And once you're there, you can identify right away which portal they belong to. Also a way for you to add or remove them from a portal. So if you're a district that uses more than one product, you know, if you've got someone who's maybe in the jobs portal and you want to quickly add them to the volunteer portal, you can do that from this screen. You can also update their roles. And one that I think gets forgotten is you can see who's locked themselves out of their account. A very common question or email that we get from support is, I went to shadow someone and it logged me out. If that happens, it's a good indicator that that particular user is locked out of their account. And we follow the same security protocols that are required of like banks or with banking and whatnot. And so if someone puts an incorrect password in a certain number of times, it locks down their account. If an account's locked down, we can't even shadow it because it's a way to protect it from hackers. And so if you go to shadow and you get kicked out right away, 9 times out of 10, it's because they're locked out. And so we'll talk about what you do to unlock an account. It's really simple, but we forget about it. We panic. We're like, oh no, their account's broken. I can't shadow them. And usually it's this, which is fine. Deb and I love being detective and figuring it out. So don't hesitate to call us or email us or whatever you need to do. This is also where you can go to reset a password for a user. Because sometimes, you know, the password reminder isn't working for someone. Maybe their spam filter blocks it and it just won't get through. So we've got to help them, and we need to have a way to reset someone's password. So we give you people who have the system manager role the ability to do that. And in user accounts, you can't update an email address, but I put this on here because I want to talk about the right way to do it. You really, so that's why it's there. Don't get it confused that you can actually do it here, but I just want to have a conversation about how to update someone's email address. Okay, so when you get to this user account tab, it looks like this, and all of your users show up, and you can see right away which portal they belong to, and you're only going to see the portals that you subscribe to. But so if you're just JAS, you're just going to see JAS. You can filter by these things. So if you want to see if someone's, I guess if you really cared, you could see who's not assigned to it. You could. Any of these fields are sortable or filter. You can filter. You can search by ID number if you know it. You can search by last name or part of a name. You could type in like the first 3 letters and it's going to filter down. Same with first name and email address. These little funnels here, you can change the parameters. So typically they default to what it starts with, but say maybe you know that they're at maybe their email address ends at Yahoo, but you don't know what the beginning is. If you click on that funnel, a little menu's gonna pop open, and you can change it to contains or begins, or you can change the search parameters. I often come in here and I'll put contains. So if I know, like I said, their email address is at yahoo.com, I could type at yahoo.com, and it's going to filter the list to everybody that has a Yahoo email address, and I might be able to find that person that way. Or if you know that it contains their last name, but you're not sure if it's at the beginning of their email or the end, you can change their filter to help you search for information. And a lot of people don't realize what that little funnel's for. I like to point that out. So on this screen, there's a lot going on here. I can see right away if there was a checkbox in this locked box, I would know that they're locked out of their account and I need to do something to help them out. And ultimately, I also have the ability to delete an account if I needed. We kind of say, don't just go deleting people because there might be important data. That's a good time if you're confused or, not confused, but if you want to know if it's a good idea to delete them or not, maybe email the support team and we will go through your system to see what's there and what's not there. But, okay. When you get here, basically after you find the person that you're wanting to help, you always start by clicking the pencil so that you can actually open their account and start making changes or things to that account. So let's go over here. So if I wanted to, maybe I have someone and I want to add them to another portal. So maybe they're, like I said, they have a jobs account and they're really having a hard time figuring out how to get on there to become a volunteer. I could come here and rather than making them register and everything, I could just add them to that portal. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open their account and I'm actually going to check the portal I want to add them to and save it. So when you add something, I just want to say, when you add someone to another portal, always save it before you look at their roles. Because if I come in here and check that portal and go straight to roles, they really it hasn't been saved, so they don't belong to that portal yet. So I'm not able to make changes to their roles. I got to add them, save it, reopen it, and come back and look at their roles. If you do it the other way, you'll get an error message, and 9 times out of 10, you'll call support saying, I got an error, what went wrong? But until you've saved it, they don't exist, and so that's why you get the error. You can also remove someone's access. So if I want to come in here and I don't want them to have access to the PD portal anymore, I could open this up and I could uncheck it and save it. And it would take away their access to that portal. So anybody with system manager role has the ability to do this. Let's go to the next slide. This is where if you're going to update roles for a specific person, I like to come here because I might want to see what other roles they have. Or the other screen where the assign roles is great for mass adding a like role. This is a good one if you're just dealing with one person. You're going to click that pencil, and when you get in here, you're going to check that user role button, and the screen is going to pop up a little second screen that looks like this, and then you have to pick which portal you want to look at the roles for. So if you're only a jobs client or if you're only volunteer, you're only going to see that particular portal. So you're going to see the portals you want. So then you would select the portal, and the screen will change a little more, and it's going to kind of pop open, and you'll see all the roles that are available for that portal. So on my example here, we're looking at the jobs portal, and I can see right away that this particular user has the role of applicant. They're an employee, and then those two mandatory roles that everybody needs, registered user and subscriber. So maybe I wanted to make them someone that's going to be able to put in job requests for a classified people and hire classified people. So I would come in here and say, okay, I want them to be able to do job requests. And my classified is supervisor 3. I could save that, and now when they go in and log into their online application, they're going to see the management tab, and they're going to have when they hover over that, they're now going to see job requests, and they're going to see applicant search and applicant reports because I gave them the job request role and I gave them the supervisor 3. Does that make sense how that works? Hopefully it does. But that's how you add roles, and then of course make sure you save it. Another little kind of quirky thing, when you're in this user accounts and looking at roles, I'll save it and I'll close it, and if I open up the next person and the screen looks like this and not like this, where I get to pick my portal, that's going to tell me that it's caching to the previous person. So what's going to happen is I bet you if I open this, the roles are going to look exactly the same as the last person I looked at, and it is that last person's role. So what I often will do is, if I want to make sure I'm not making any mistakes, is when I'm in that applicant, let me go back a slide real quick and I'll show you. I'll go back to, wrong slide, sorry. Can't see from my little screen, it's so tiny down here. I'll come back one more, sorry. I'll come here and I'll actually click on assign roles, and then I'll go back to user accounts, and that will clear the cache so that I don't accidentally give someone the wrong roles. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. I don't know. Go back to that role thing. But just know that sometimes the screen caches. And so if you come in here and open it and it automatically opens to a portal, if you have more than one portal, you can actually just click on a different portal and it'll refresh. But if you're only a jobs application, just be careful that you're not caching. Anything I'm missing on that, Deb?
Nope, that covered that part.
Okay. So unlocking accounts. I said, if you know someone's locked out, you're also going to click the pencil, open their record, and you'll see right here is locked out. If there's a checkbox, then if that is checked, you're going to need to open it and actually click into that and remove it and save it, and that will unlock their account so that they can log in and you can shadow them again. That's one people forget about. Resetting passwords. So people can have the system email them their passwords, but sometimes it's just easier to do it for them. We all have those users where it's like, okay, I'm just going to start fresh. You're going to also come to the same thing, and you're going to press that change password button. And when you do that, you get this little screen, and then you're going to type in your new password and you're going to confirm it. The one thing to remember is the only rules we have with the portal is that it's 8 characters long. We don't care if there's capitals or symbols. It's a good idea to use them, but it's not mandatory. So when I'm helping people reset a password, I usually just put the word password, which is the worst possible thing, and I save it, and I tell them that. But what I then do is oops, let me go back a screen. I like to press this force password change button. And what that does is when that person logs in with that temporary password I gave them, the system's going to prompt them to update their password one more time to something more secure. If you're on the line with someone and they give you a password they want that's secure, I would set it to what they want and not do that. But if it's someone who's just stuck and you want to get them in, you could just make it a real simple password. And then once they log in, the system you can press this button and the system will walk them through updating the password themselves to something more secure. Questions with passwords? I think you guys all do real well with updating passwords, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay. Updating a user's email address. I just like to talk about this because this is kind of this can be frustrating for some, we'll just put it that way. Because we can't collect Social Security numbers from applicants and volunteers and PD users and stuff, the only real unique identifier in the system is their email address, and no two users can have the same email address. I know that sometimes on the volunteer portal we'll get a nice lady comes in and she creates her account, and then her husband logs in and uses that same email address and maybe puts his new information over theirs. We've fixed a few things like that because they don't realize they have to have their own individual email address. So we've given you a couple options on how to update email addresses. One is to shadow that user, go to their profile section and put in the new email address and save their changes. Or two, if they're an employee, and this is true on ProDev, Employee Records, and JAS, wouldn't be volunteer because they're not employees. You have a menu called Employee Information. So if they have that employee role, they're going to show up there, and you can go into Employee Information and actually update an email address right then and there without shadowing someone, and you're going to save it. The thing to remember when you update email addresses is that it takes a few minutes to do that update, and if your site is really, really busy, it can take even longer. Here's what it looks like under Employee Information. The screen, and you'd go in here and you put your email address. And until those updates are made, you will get an error if you try to shadow them. So what I tell people is if you're going to change email addresses, do it at the end of the day, go home, they'll be fine by the morning. Or if you need immediate access, you can email the support team, and we have a magic button that we can press that forces that update to happen a little quicker. Because remember that,
sorry. If you change their email, like an employee that actually came to us as an applicant and then later became an employee and later became an administrator, her information in the system was all under her applicant. It was a maiden name. It was everything different than what she is now. And so rather than, I didn't realize I could do this, but I gave her all of her user roles through her maiden name and her initial applicant information. So if I were to go in and change all of this, so she's technically an employee now, like changing her email, change her name to the correct last name, does her password and all of that still remain intact from what it was as an applicant?
Yeah, the password.
Good. Okay.
Yes. So if you're going to do a name and an email change, I would suggest you do it this way. Change all the name first, save it, and then do that email. Because remember how that email takes a while? So at least get their name and everything changed first, press save, and then do the email. Don't try to do them at the same time because it can sometimes throw an error and confuse things.
Okay.
I don't know why it is. It's annoying. But the one thing I wanted to add about that email, it's that primary identifier. It's that unique code. And when you update an email address, it actually has to go throughout the whole system and replace those emails with the old and the new. And those emails, the email is stored in like 4 major tables. And like I said, if your site's really busy, for some reason, the system doesn't prioritize email changes as high priority as some of the other things that happen in the system. And so it waits to do them. I don't know why it is, but that's the way it is, because typically people don't change their email every day, I guess. So the system rates things. So like if you're pulling reports, they're going to say a report is more important than updating this email. So if you're really busy, or applying for a job is more important. So that's why there's a delay. But like I said, Deb and I have a magic button that we can press that tells it, no, this is the priority, and it gets it done quicker. So if you change emails, what I have with some districts is they'll go in and they'll make a bunch of changes, and they'll just email support and say, hey, press the magic button, and then it resolves everybody, and it does all those emails at once, and you're set. But just know that there is a delay from the moment you change someone's email. If a user does it themselves, it's not an issue because they're already in their account. They can keep going on and doing stuff while that's working in the background. You just can't shadow that account until that email is completed. Does that kind of make sense? I hope it makes sense. And Deb, am I explaining that right?
Yeah. It's a little complicated.
It is. And there's a couple
and
tables. Yeah.
I think it's really important that if you're adjusting information on an applicant's account is to make all of the other changes first, and then that email is the last change, because that's sometimes how accounts get lost.
Or, yeah, goofed up. And it really comes down to that it's the unique code, because we can't do a social security number, it's email address, and it's vital. And there's a couple tables within your database where that email is actually encrypted and stuff. And with the password, all these things are encrypted. And so when things go wrong and like counts disappear, it's usually because all their data is still there, but something happened with that encrypted table. And Deb and I have to kind of go and really search and figure it out and fix it, you know. But every once in a while, things kind of go goofy, and it's usually because someone made a change and it just things went sideways. But it doesn't happen often, but it does happen once in a while. Okay. And that's my little thing, you know, there's a process. Don't try to reshadow right away, blah, 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 blah. We talked about that. We can skip over that now. Okay. Another part of helping users is, you know, shadowing their accounts. And when I get on the phone with someone, the first thing I often do is I do shadow their account. I know you guys do too, just so I can see kind of what's going on. And just a reminder, so to shadow, you've got to have that system manager role, and you got to go to the home page. Doesn't matter what portal you're on, volunteer, PD, jobs. And when you're on that home page and you look up in the top right corner by your name, you get the little blue man, we call him. And if you click on that, it opens the shadow user menu, and you start by picking the role. I always go with registered user because remember, that's a role everybody gets. So that's a good way to find someone. If you search by applicant, you're only going to find people that have the applicant role. And remember, until their profile is complete, people are a guest. And so I do have people that only search by applicant, and then they can't find people. So my best practice is to always search by registered user, since everybody has that role. But that's just what I like to do. And then you find the name and you press shadow, and then you're magically in that person's account. One little side note when it comes to shadowing, if you stay in someone's account longer than 15 minutes, as a security, the system actually logs you out of your account and logs you into their account. And when you come back to try to unshadow, you can't. You actually have to log out and log back in. And it's just a security measure. We're a Microsoft partner. It's something that Microsoft has set up. And that's why, because people get frustrated, like, oh, I had to log out and log back in. And that just tells us that you are actually shadowed that account for longer than 15 minutes, and the system kind of switched it over. Okay, what's next after shadowing? Duplicates. Most common support question, and Deb hates duplicates because I'm bad and I passed them off on her. I'm sorry, Deb, I love you. We are more than happy to assist merging accounts when it's needed, you know. So if you have a PD system and you don't want duplicates. If you have a job and a PD system or employee records, you don't want duplicates because it can affect complication. But, you know, if you're just a job account and it doesn't matter, you know, like one was from 5 years ago, you can leave it alone unless it really, really bothers you. What we might suggest you do is log into both accounts and see what information's there and have the applicant transfer information and save you some time and then delete the extra account or not, you know. But if you need help kind of figuring out what's there or not, we can assist with that. You know, is it going to be harmful to keep 2 accounts? I don't know, but you know, like if it's an old one and a new one, like there's been a big span, but if they've created 2 accounts right away, you want probably all of them to be in just one. So we can work with you on merging accounts. Like I said, Deb hates it because she gets most of those. We do have a form that makes it a lot easier on Deb if you fill it out, and that's the link, and here's the little form, what it looks like. You come here and you fill it out. If you need that link sent to you, I can get that off to you. And it just helps, it's actual Google form, and you identify the people and some other things, so that helps that with the merging process. Because one, we need to know a little bit of information when we come to merging an account, like which email address needs to be kept and such and so on. Deb, anything you want to add about duplicates specifically?
I think it's really important. We've encountered situations where there is an identical name, including middle name, initial, and I get a request and it's a different person.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I guess my point is that you take a look at the account and not just assume that they're one and the same. And part of this applicant account merge request form, you know, we ask you to verify and, you know, actually, you know, print out either in PDF form, print to a PDF and save those records in case, you know, something like that occurs where we've merged the accounts of, say, 2 different people by accident. So just know, you know, what's in the accounts and, you know, somehow make a backup, because when it's gone, it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Deb's had people say, this Sam Smith needs to be merged. She's gone in and found out they're 2 completely different people, not related. And we don't know how to separate out the information once it's been merged. So if you can help do groundwork. Yeah.
In regards to using that good old delete button, if you have an applicant on the line, and I've had this happen where this person, for whatever reason, has 3 different accounts, you know, because couldn't remember what they initially applied online to last year and started all over again. And if they have told us that this particular email is the one that they're going to start using from now on, is there any problem with just deleting the other 2 to get rid of them, or should they be merged?
Here's the deal. There are some laws with retention of, you know, around hiring. You know, you have to keep data for so long.
Okay.
So if they've applied for a job, I would not delete an account.
Okay, but if they just started the profile or...
Yeah, like say they just did the profile, they haven't done anything beyond that, that's appropriate to delete. But when it comes down to they've applied for something, you need to pause, because that's where your you know, the rules fall into place, so to speak. Is it 7 years, 5 years? I can't even remember all what. So, and that's where we will help you. We are more than happy to help you. But yeah, if you shadow them, and we get a lot of requests to merge stuff where people haven't even made it past the profile and they've got 3 accounts. And what we do is we just delete
a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
You know, if a rule of thumb, if we check on the jobs tab to see if they have applied anywhere else, you know, if they haven't applied anywhere, and it just, you know, maybe went in and did the disclosure and, you know, I don't know, did all of those things but haven't officially applied to any jobs, would it be safe to assume it'd be okay to delete, or is that still something we should consult?
Yeah, well, and like if you looked at the 2 accounts and say both disclosures were identical, yes. But maybe if you looked at the account and the disclosures were way off, maybe not. You know, you know, like if they had a hit on one but not the other.
Yeah.
And that's where you could ask us, hey, will you look at this? And we can pull the data up and look at it for you. And we're happy to do that. It's really important with PD, because that's compensation-based, that we get those accounts merged. We don't want them having two separate transcripts and stuff, because especially with teachers, you know, those clock hours kind of, you know, decide what they're going to get paid. So we, you know, if you see duplicate PD accounts right away, let us know, because we will get those merged. The big thing is we need to know which email address to keep and stuff. Deb, am I missing anything?
No, that's absolutely correct. And one other suggestion is if you do have, and this would go for, you know, the jobs portal, is if you do have an applicant with 2 or 3, and I've seen up to 4 different accounts, and some are quite old, you can actually archive those, and you know, then you won't see them under applicant search where they come up twice.
But then you're keeping
that's right.
for legal reasons, because they're, you know, you have all your legal, you're meeting your legal responsibility by archiving it because it's there, it's accessible, but we're just not going to mess with it.
That's right, and it only comes active again if they try to log in under that same initial one. So that way you don't keep seeing it every time you query that last name.
Exactly.
Okay.
You talk to them, and these were like 2 years ago, they're not going to apply. Now they're using this new account. You could just set it aside and archive.
Okay. Archive, my friend. Thank you.
It is. So let's see. I think, oh, and just quick sidebar for my ERM. Adding people, the easiest way to add people to employee records, of course, is to do a job recommendation. But, you know, there is a process if, you know, sometimes we don't hire people through the system, and you can add them through system utilities. And we will work with you on that. I just wanted to bring that up. I'm not going to go over that in detail because as we're transitioning people to ERM, we're going to work with you on that. I'm going to skip over. But the big thing is, you know, lean on your support team. Deb and I are paid to help you. So if you have questions, contact us. You can call the 877 number. You can email support. By emailing support, it goes to whoever's manning the desk. So, you know, if you email me and I'm out with the flu, I might not get back to you right away. But if you email support, there's always someone manning that email address. So, you know, you're welcome to email us directly, but just know that if, you know, someone's always manning support. We might be on vacation personally, so that's just a good rule of thumb. And it's easier to remember that email address. But that's it. I hope we explained some of the roles a little better and it makes more sense for you. I really do. And some of those user account things. If not, you're welcome to stay on the line. We'll talk to you. Or if you want to have a conversation with just us and you and not the whole big group, we can do that too. But I hope you learned something today or got some clarification. That's really my big hope for today, is that you're walking away with some clarity on something that maybe you didn't get before.